He thought he was having some heart trouble, and he went to the ER, and they told him it was heartburn. So he came back relieved. Other than that, there had not been any sort of warning. The night he died, it was a Sunday night. My sister was home from college because it was close to Christmas. My brother was still at his college, which was not too far from where we lived. We said goodnight, went upstairs, and I just remember my sister waking me up shortly after midnight saying, "Wake up, Daddy had a heart attack."
You lost your father at age 15, correct?
Yeah.
Of a heart attack.
Yeah.
How did you get through that?
I mean, the short answer is my mom she's really strong and always was. And that sense of humor was very important. You know, she was able to crack jokes almost the night of, not quite, but almost, and kind of taught us how to keep laughing, even through the dark times. It was an odd time of life for me because my dad died December 15th, 1985. I was a sophomore in high school. It was sudden. It was right before Christmas, and it couldn't have been a more explosive event on our family. But at the same time, I was popular that year. I hadn't always been. I was very badly bullied earlier. But that year, I was popular. And I had lost some weight. I was starting to look better. My acne was clearing up. I was getting invited to these cool parties with, good-looking boys who started to ask me out. And so for a 15-year-old girl, all of those things are great things. And so I remember that year as just feeling such an odd mix of intense sadness and depression, and yet happiness and hopefulness about my life and like how it could be, and escapism, when not in terms of drugs or alcohol, but just like, going to the prom with the junior, right? Like, that's cool. Like shopping for a dress. Back in those days, we didn't have cell phones, like just waiting for him to call, and then he did call. I remember those moments almost as acutely as I remember the sadness around my dad's death. I think just given the value system of a 15-year-old girl.
Where it happened suddenly?
So he was only 45, and my mom was 44, and he really hadn't had any health problems. He wasn't an exerciser, 1985, a lot of people weren't. He had a relatively stressful job. He was a professor, first at Syracuse and then at SUNY Albany. But he loved his job. He wasn't heavy, but he did smoke, and he drank. Not to excess, but he smoked. And about a week or 10 days before he died, he thought he was having some heart trouble, and he went to the ER, and they told him it was heartburn. So he came back relieved. Other than that, there had not been any sort of warning. And the night he died, it was a Sunday night. My sister was home from college because it was close to Christmas. My brother was still at his college, which was not too far from where we lived. And said goodnight, went upstairs, and I just remember my sister waking me up shortly after midnight saying, "Wake up, Daddy had a heart attack." And it's like an otherworldly, it's an out-of-body experience,
Wow. That's sad. You had just mentioned that you were bullied as a little girl. Why were you bullied?
Why?
Why?
That's an interesting question. I think it's because I had a fairly big, not huge, but fairly big personality. So I attracted attention, which is somewhat dangerous when you're young. Kind of always. It could be potentially dangerous, but when you're young, most kids just want to fly under the radar, have friends. I wasn't trying to get attention. I just had a large personality. I've always laughed that I consider myself, now I'm fairly attractive, though it's going downhill as I get older. It's fine. But I have an unattractive girl's personality because that's who I really am. That's how I grew up. I was never good looking. I wasn't a cute child. I wasn't a particularly good-looking tween. It wasn't until I got, later in high school that I was like, I need to work on this. I can do better. Got to lose some weight. I got to get to a dermatologist. I had a big space between my two front teeth. I'm like, I got to get that fixed. I got to put some sun in this hair. And I started teaching aerobics. My brother said, just casually one time, he said, the girls with the best bodies all do aerobics. I was like, that's what I'll do. So anyway, I do think it was just, if you have a big personality, you're potentially a target as a kid.
How would they bully you?
Well, I had some bullying when I was in 4th grade that was unpleasant before I left Syracuse, but it was sort of more normal bullying. But it was bad. Like, I was at a girl's birthday party and they all started flicking me. All of them. I was like, kids can be so mean. And I remember calling my dad and he came to get me early. And when we walked inside, I remember he looked at my mom and my mom looked at him like, how is she, kind of thing. And my dad gave her the thumbs down. But that's not, I remember it. Here I am all these years later, but it was the 7th grade where things got bad. And really, if you could have seen me in 7th grade, Shawn, honestly, like, I can't believe those girls picked on me. I had enough problems. Like, why would they have picked on that version of me? But they did. And I've never named the ringleader, but she knows who she is. And she just turned every person in the school against me. She decided I was out. I was otherized. And I went from having lots of friends to having no friends for almost a year. And 7th grade is a tough year. Mm-hmm. That's 12. You're very fragile. You don't really have all the skills you need to deal with that kind of a thing. And on top of that, it was at an era, at a time when, talking to my parents about it was unthinkable. We weren't talking about bullying or like going to guidance counselors about, it just wasn't a thing yet. So I was ashamed about it. So I didn't want anyone to know in my home. And so it was it was like a year of torture in a way. It was like an extended torture.
What ended it?
I don't know.
They just gave up?
She just decided one day I was acceptable again.
There's a lot of kids that go through this today, especially with the cyberbullying and it's a big problem that a lot of kids are dealing with. And so I'm curious if you have any advice for kids that are being bullied. What could you have done back then to end it? Or
yeah, if I could talk to the 12-year-old version of me, I 100% would say tell your parents. They can help you. And it doesn't have to be, you can establish some parameters like you have to agree not to call the girl's parents, something like that. But your parents can help. And I, as a parent, would absolutely intervene if this were happening to my child in whatever way I could. Because while I do think you can learn a lot from some bullying, like some short stints of bullying, I think it actually creates a more empathetic person, right? You're less likely to bully, I think, if it happens like that. But if it goes on and on and on, it can cause real damage. I still think it affects my relationships.
Really?
My friendships, yeah.
How so?
I'm not good at pursuing friendship. Like, once I have a friend, I'm a good friend, but all the friends I have pursued me.
Interesting.
I'm very wary of, like, people. Rejection and getting, hurt. Getting hurt.
I wanted to ask, too, I didn't want to skip over the bullying when you brought that up, but I also wanted to ask about advice for people that have lost a parent as a child. And what advice would you have for that? Because there are a lot of kids that lose parents, and me coming from a military background, I know a lot of Gold Star kids, and so every time I get the opportunity to to talk to somebody like you that has been through it, I have to ask.
Well, I think number one, lean into faith, even if you're not faithful. That's a good time to start. Just go and sit there. I used to be so comforted just by sitting in the church. One of my frustrations when my dad died was I couldn't drive. I was only 15. I just turned 15 a month earlier, so I really wasn't even close to driving. And so I'd ride my bike to the church and I'd sit there, but I couldn't get to the cemetery because it was too far away. And I really wanted to sit by the cemetery very badly. It's just, you knew physically that's where he was. So I think young children need that time to say goodbye. It's not a 1 or 2 day process at a wake and a funeral. There will be time of needing to sit with God or by oneself, maybe in a place like a church with the candles in the windows where you just feel it's bigger than you, or by the gravesite. And I think as a parent, I might ask, is that something you want to do? Because I wouldn't have suggested that to my mom. She could have driven me, but there was no way I would have asked that because she was grieving and I wouldn't have wanted to upset her.
Mm-hmm.
But she would have done it. And I think that's maybe a parent could go to the kid and say, do you want that? I can drop you off. I can pick you up. I don't have to be standing there for it. I guess I also want to say, this is sort of part 2. This sounds weird, but there is a silver lining to it, because I know my friend just lost his wife and he has 2 young boys. She just died suddenly last September. And he was like, can you tell me what to say to them? Can you tell me anything to make me feel better about what just happened to them? And this is in that category. The biggest gift to come out of losing my dad was the fact that you understand mortality in your limited time here like no other. You can't understand it the way someone who's lost a parent or a loved one at an early age understands it without going through that. And so again, if you spend the time reflecting on what it means, what the pain signifies to you, then you can arrive at the obvious conclusion, which is you must make decisions in your life like it's an emergency. It's the old no tomorrow is promised, but you just know it on a gut level. So you can't waste time. You can't waste time in a relationship that is unhappy, in a job that is unhappy, in a you that is unhappy. You must take active steps always, always to improve your situation.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.